Committee will come to order. We meet today to consider favorably reporting the nomination of Congressman Billy Long to be Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service. As we have done with other nominees, the meeting this morning will provide members with the opportunity to offer remarks on Congressman Long's nomination. We will then recess briefly following member statements and then proceed to this morning's nominations hearing. We will notify members of a time and a location later today to conduct the vote on Congressman Long's nomination. At his hearing, Congressman Long outlined his vision to transform the IRS through systems modernization, a renewed focus on efficiency, and a much-needed change in IRS culture. If confirmed, I look forward to working with him to ensure the IRS focuses on helping American taxpayers to better understand and meet their tax responsibilities, and that it enforces the tax law with integrity and fairness to all. I was encouraged to hear Congressman Long clearly commit that the IRS will not and should not be politicized on my watch. I also would like to thank Congressman Long for his time working through the Finance Committee's rigorous nomination process, in addition to responding to a large amount of questions for the record. At his hearing and in his written responses, Congressman Long clearly affirmed that all of his tax consulting work was as an independent contractor for Capital Edge Strategies. He never performed work for White River or anyone else regarding Native American tribal tax credits. With respect to the contributions to his Senate campaign, Congressman Long stated time and again that he followed Federal Election Commission guidelines. In sum, Congressman Long is uniquely suited to instill needed change at the IRS, and I will vote in favor of his nomination. I encourage my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to do the same. I now recognize Ranking Member Wyden for his remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Over the last several years, I have heard every member of this committee, all the Democrats, all the Republicans, talk about the importance of independence and neutrality at the IRS. If you genuinely believe in those priorities, you cannot vote for Billy Long's nomination for the IRS Commissioner. Here's what's known about Congressman Long. He wasn't on the Ways and Means Committee. He wrote no original tax legislation in 12 years in the Congress. He has no tax policy experience, but he's got lots of tax fraud experience. When he left office, he threw in with a bunch of fly-by-night operators selling tax deals that were sketchy at best. He was paid to promote fake tribal tax credits by a company called White River Energy. After White River's scheme got exposed as a fraud in a Bloomberg report in mid-December, the company's CFO reassured panicky investors that everything would work out. They'd soon have friends at the IRS under Donald Trump to take the heat off. He said he'd be able to use his contacts to obtain favors and special private rulings. We have got this on tape. The CFO and several other White River employees then started making big-dollar donations to Congressman Long's Senate campaign. That had been mothballed all the way back to 2022. More than $165,000 came into the campaign after Trump announced Long's nomination. Much of it was from people affiliated with White River. Mr. Long pocketed $130,000 of that himself. Now, he has repeatedly been asked to explain his role in the scheme I've described. What did he know about these fake tax credits? Who did he talk to about them? Why did White River employees think it was a good idea to donate to his dormant campaign? None of those questions were answered. Finance Committee investigators obtained information from the IRS that these tribal tax credits Congressman Long helped sell were indeed fake, and the promoters could face prosecution. Staff read that confirmation aloud to Congressman Long last month. He became outraged. He demanded to know who at the IRS had provided that information to the Finance Committee. He said he'd find out immediately if he gets confirmed. If his involvement in that one tax scam wasn't enough, there is more. He was slinging employee retention tax credits long after they had technically expired, when a well-meaning rescue program for small businesses had been overrun by fraudsters. Congressman Long is on tape saying that everybody qualifies for the employee retention tax credit. That's a lie. He bragged about getting money for a funeral home, even though the pandemic was a boom time for that kind of business due to the number of Americans dying of COVID-19. Finance Committee investigators obtained another recording, this time of an executive at a firm called Appreciation Financial that sold these tax scam-ridden tax credits. He said he made Congressman Long his guest to the inauguration earlier this year. He said they had dinner and spent a few nights together. His exact quote on the subject of IRS enforcement around employee retention credits is this: "We could be worried," and I quote here, "about promoter audits now that we don't have to worry about any of that now with Billy coming in." Echoing the executive at White River, the second tax credit promoter said he'd been promised special favors by Congressman Long himself. Again, we've got it on tape. I haven't even mentioned Congressman Long's multiple letters urging politically motivated attacks against nonprofit organizations. That, colleagues, is going to be the opposite of neutrality and independence that Democrats and Republicans talk about here in the committee. The fact is, these scandals I'm mentioning are too big to ignore. And colleagues, I know for a fact that there is going to be more troubling information that comes to light. So I close with this. It is not too late to go back and find somebody who isn't surrounded by scandal, who's got the experience managing a large organization, who's got some real experience working on tax policy. What's needed in our country now, more than ever, is an independent IRS. For that reason, I strongly oppose the Long nomination, and I'm going to urge all my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, Senator Crapo.
Thank you, Senator Wyden. Normally, I would turn to any other senator who's interested in making a statement, but seeing none, unless there is objection, we will proceed to a recess briefly before the hearing that is scheduled for 10:30 for other nominees. And we will vote off of the floor at a time to be agreed. Is there objection?
There isn't. I just want to make sure so all colleagues understand. We'll go to the regular hearing at 10:30, 45 minutes from now.
That's correct.
Thank you.
With that, the committee stands in recess. This hearing will come to order. Thank you to our nominees, Mr. Barloon, Ms. Dillon, and Mr. Morrissey, for being here today. Congratulations on your nominations, and thank you all for your willingness to serve. Today we will first hear from Joe Barloon, who is nominated to serve as Deputy U.S. Trade Representative and U.S. Ambassador to the World Trade Organization, or WTO. The WTO is an important institution, but in need of a stronger American leadership. The last administration failed to engage the organization in a number of areas, including negotiations on rules for digital trade. This weakened existing disciplines, including U.S. intellectual property rights under the WTO TRIPS agreement. Mr. Barloon is well positioned to restore strong U.S. leadership at the WTO. During President Trump's first term, Mr. Barloon served as the USTR General Counsel and as an acting Deputy USTR. Those roles gave him firsthand experience in WTO operations, including its dispute settlement system and the need for its reform. Mr. Barloon, as our country's top WTO official in Geneva, I look forward to learning more about how you would leverage your USTR and private sector experience to protect and promote America's interests. Moving to the second nominee before us today, Janet Dillon, who is nominated to serve as the Director of the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation. The PBGC plays an important role in securing workers' retirement benefits, and your nomination to lead the agency comes at an important moment. In addition to operating insurance programs that protect millions of Americans' retirement benefits, the PBGC has been charged with implementing the Special Financial Assistance Program, a program created to bail out failing private sector multi-employer pension plans. There has been bipartisan interest in addressing the underlying structural problems that have plagued the multi-employer pension system for years. Rather than focus on long-term bipartisan solutions, the American Rescue Plan pumped $90 billion taxpayer dollars into these plans with no structural reforms to prevent more plans from failing. While the PBGC has encountered issues implementing this program, I appreciate the efforts of the PBGC staff and agency leadership to implement a program that is a departure from the agency's core mission. Ms. Dillon, you are well suited to take on these challenges, along with the responsibility of overseeing the insurance programs that protect millions of Americans' retirement benefits. I look forward to working with you and hearing how you will approach this role. And finally, we will hear from Brian Morrissey, who is nominated to serve as General Counsel of the Treasury Department. The General Counsel of the Treasury Department must provide nonpartisan legal and policy advice to the Secretary and other senior department officials. As Congress works to enact new pro-growth tax policy, the General Counsel will be a vital team member during the Department's efforts to craft regulations and other guidance related to the bill. Mr. Morrissey is undoubtedly qualified for the job, having previously served as the Deputy General Counsel at the Treasury Department during the first Trump administration. Mr. Morrissey's nomination has also been supported by individuals on both sides of the aisle. Prior Treasury General Counsels in Democratic and Republican administrations, reaching back to 1977, have written in support of his nomination. Mr. Morrissey, I look forward to working with you, if confirmed. Thank you all again for your time today. And with that, I recognize Ranking Member Wyden for his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We meet this morning to discuss three important nominations: the General Counsel of the Treasury, the head of the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, and Deputy U.S. Trade Representative. I'm going to start with the nominee to be Treasury's top lawyer. In my view, Brian Morrissey is a well-qualified nominee who has the right sort of experience inside the federal government and in the private sector. The real question is, how does somebody approach being in-house counsel for an administration that makes a sport out of breaking the law? The Trump administration has illegally fired thousands of Treasury employees. The president is determined to crack down on free speech by weaponizing the IRS. It's stomping all over taxpayer privacy laws in what I believe are extraordinarily dangerous approaches. I've got serious concerns about the Trump administration watering down a key anti-money laundering law called the Corporate Transparency Act. This was a bipartisan effort led by Senator Whitehouse and I with the current Secretary of State, Senator Rubio, former Senator Rubio. It's a bipartisan priority, and it took years to get it passed. Undermining it is a gift to financial criminals. Mr. Morrissey's credentials, in my view, having discussed matters with him yesterday, aren't really the issue. The issue is, if he's confirmed, he's going to be surrounded by corruption and lawlessness the minute he walks through the door. He can expect to face some hard-hitting questions on these issues and others today, as he and I have discussed. Next up, Janet Dillon's nomination to be Director of the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, what's known as the PBGC. Now, I think it would be fair to say that you don't get a lot of discussion in coffee shops across the land about the PBGC, but the agency gets the job done month after month, year after year, helping millions of American workers and retirees who probably didn't realize that the agency is a lifeline that ensures they're able to enjoy a dignified retirement. It's a key to guaranteeing people receive the benefits they've earned through years and years of hard work. In 2021, Democrats passed a law called the Butch-Lewis statute that strengthened the PBGC and saved the pensions of more than 1.5 million retirees, workers, and beneficiaries. In the process of implementing the law, the agency has done important work in cutting down on improper payments and recovering dollars that shouldn't have gone out. These payments account for less than 1% of the funds that have rescued the pensions of so many Americans under the Butch-Lewis law. There's been an effort by some Republicans to attack the Butch-Lewis statute and undermine the PBGC finances. In my view, that would be a recipe for disaster for millions of Americans. My Democratic colleagues and I want to make sure that nobody meddles with the law. If you do, you're driving millions of Americans into destitution and endangering the retirements of many more. Ms. Dillon has some experience in federal service, but even more in private practice. During the first Trump administration, she was appointed chair of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and senators have raised significant concerns about her tenure in that role. The end effect was that a whole lot of vulnerable Americans had nowhere to turn when they faced discrimination in the workplace. It was a big win for big corporations who wanted to get away with sweeping discrimination cases under the rug. My colleagues on the Senate Help Committee were denied an opportunity to get answers about Ms. Dillon's work at the EEOC, and they also weren't able to talk with her about her plans for the Pension Benefit Corporation if she's confirmed. My hope is that we'll begin to be able to make up for that today. Finally, Mr. Barloon's nomination to serve as Deputy U.S. Trade Representative to the World Trade Organization. Donald Trump is charging ahead with poisonous tariffs and erratic trade threats that have raised prices for families and wrecked supply chains for American businesses. A better strategy would be fixing the trade system to make sure that U.S. workers, farmers, and companies are able to get a fair shake. That, in my view, includes fixing the World Trade Organization. There's been a lot of talk about how it needs reform. So what I'd like to hear today is how the Trump administration, Mr. Barloon, are going to move beyond some of these cliches and platitudes and threats and actually get something done. I also have concern about Mr. Barloon's statements with respect to his work for foreign entities. He gave inconsistent answers to questions by our staff about whether he advised a foreign government-owned client on trade matters. So we need some clear answers on this from the nominee on why he did and why he didn't fully disclose these matters during the vetting process. Thanks to all three of you for joining us here today. I look forward to our question and answers. Thank you, Senator Crapo.
Thank you, Senator Wyden. In a moment, our nominees will share their opening statements. Before doing so, I will provide a short introduction of each nominee. Mr. Barloon is a partner in the financial services group at the law firm Skadden Arps. From 2019 to 2021, he served as general counsel to USTR Lighthizer and as acting deputy USTR. As general counsel, Mr. Barloon led U.S. enforcement actions against several countries and was responsible for the litigation on behalf of the U.S. at the World Trade Organization. In addition, he was the chief U.S. counsel for adoption and implementation of numerous trade agreements, including the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA. Ms. Dillon previously served as chair of the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission during President Trump's first term. She has also served as a general counsel in the private sector, including at Dollar Tree stores, Burlington stores, J.C. Penney, and U.S. Airways. Ms. Dillon also practiced at the law firm of Skadden Arps. Mr. Morrissey is currently a partner in the law firm of Sidley Austin. During President Trump's first term, he served as Deputy General Counsel for the Treasury Department and in senior roles at the Department of Justice. He's also served as a law clerk to the U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Before each of you give your opening statements, I have 4 obligatory questions that we ask all nominees before the Senate Finance Committee. First, is there anything that you are aware of in your background that might present a conflict of interest with the duties of the office to which you have been nominated? You can each just answer briefly across the line.
No, Senator.
No.
No, Senator.
Second, do you know of any reason, personal or otherwise, that would in any way prevent you from fully and honorably discharging the responsibilities of the office to which you have been nominated?
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
Third, do you agree without reservation to respond to any reasonable summons to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of Congress if you are confirmed?
Yes, Senator.
Yes, Senator.
Yes.
And finally, do you commit to providing a prompt response in writing to any questions addressed to you by any senator of this committee?
Yes, Senator.
Yes, Senator.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. We will begin with Mr. Barloon's opening statement, followed by Ms. Dillon, and then Mr. Morrissey.
Thank you. Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Wyden, and members of this committee, I am honored to appear before you today as President Trump's nominee for Deputy United States Trade Representative and United States Ambassador to the World Trade Organization. I am grateful to President Trump and Ambassador Greer for their trust and confidence. I appreciate the time that members and staff of the committee have spent with me, and I look forward to working with you if I am confirmed. I also want to express my appreciation to my family, many of whom are present today. I am grateful to my father and my late mother, as well as my 4 siblings, and I am particularly thankful for the support of my wife, Susan, my children, Joseph, Claire, and Timothy. I was honored in 2019 when Robert Lighthizer asked me to join USTR as its general counsel, and when he subsequently asked me to serve as acting deputy USTR. I learned a tremendous amount working every day with Ambassador Lighthizer and admired his commitment to making trade work for ordinary Americans. While at USTR, I also worked side by side with Jamison Greer. His deep knowledge of trade laws, his commitment to our country, and his skills in forging consensus and exhibiting leadership were extraordinary. I very much look forward to working with Ambassador Greer again if I am confirmed. The United States has benefited tremendously from international trade over the course of our history, but in recent decades, many Americans have been hurt by trade policies and practices that did not always place the American economy and the American worker first, and that depended upon a faith that all of our trading partners would play by the rules, a faith we now know to be misplaced. President Trump's America First trade policy aims to make trade work for the benefit of all Americans by creating jobs, promoting innovation, strengthening the national defense, raising wages for our workers, and restoring our manufacturing capabilities. Early in my tenure as USTR General Counsel, I traveled to Geneva and met with senior WTO officials and representatives from many of our key trading partners. As General Counsel, I supervised the litigation of WTO disputes, and our office issued a comprehensive report on the WTO appellate body. These experiences made clear to me the many ways in which the WTO has fallen short of its great promise. The WTO was designed to be an organization of like-minded members committed to market-oriented policies. The WTO was founded to promote reciprocal arrangements to reduce trade barriers predicated on free and fair competition in global markets. But the WTO has strayed from its founding purpose and has failed to achieve these objectives. There are many reasons for this failure. Chief among them are the admission to the WTO of non-market economies that are not committed to its founding principles, as well as the failure of many members to meet their obligations under the WTO agreements. Moreover, the WTO's dispute settlement system drifted from the limited role its founders envisioned and took on a role more akin to a World Trade Court, purporting to create new law that would bind the United States and other members. Despite these failings, I believe the WTO may still be able to reform in ways that will help it achieve its founders' goals. U.S. farmers, fishermen, ranchers, and businesses of all types will benefit from increasing access to the markets of WTO members. This can be done by ensuring that WTO members follow the rules. If confirmed, my role will be to work in good faith with representatives of other WTO members to help advance the interests of the United States, whether directly through WTO bodies or indirectly through dialogue and collaboration with members that share our concerns and are committed to the WTO principles of fairness and reciprocity. Thank you for considering my nomination, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Dillon.
Thank you, Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Wyden, and members of the committee for the opportunity to appear before you today. It is an honor to be here as President Trump's nominee to be Director of the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, and I thank the President for his nomination. With me here today is my husband, Uttam Dillon. We will celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary in August, and I'm grateful every day for his love and support. I grew up in Southern California, the daughter of 2 public school teachers. While my parents were never wealthy, they were able to retire comfortably with the security of the pensions that they earned as school teachers. I witnessed firsthand the positive impact that a financially secure retirement has on retirees and their families. After college and law school, I worked in private practice for 13 years. I then moved to an in-house role and ultimately served as a general counsel for several Fortune 500 companies. In 2017, I was privileged to be nominated by President Trump to be a commissioner on the EEOC. After confirmation, I served as chair and commissioner of the EEOC, and following the 2020 election, I served as a commissioner on that 5-member body. As chair, I led the EEOC's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, providing timely compliance assistance through the much-cited What You Should Know series. I'm proud of the EEOC's results during my tenure as chair. In fiscal year 2020, the EEOC secured a then record amount of recovery, $535 million, for victims of discrimination in the workplace. At the same time, the agency reduced its backlog of pending private sector charges to the lowest level in 14 years, and its backlog of federal sector hearing requests declined by almost 16%. I believe that my roles in leadership positions in the private sector, as well as my experience leading a federal government agency, provide me with a relevant experience that will equip me well for the position of director at the PBGC. If I have the privilege of being confirmed, I will work to ensure that the agency operates with excellence and that its actions are fully transparent. Today, over 31 million workers, retirees, and beneficiaries rely on the PBGC to protect their retirement security. The PBGC itself, overseen by its board of directors, manages assets valued at over $150 billion. Despite its outside role in protecting the retirement security of the American worker, the PBGC has faced challenges. For instance, the Special Financial Assistance Program, authorized under the last administration, required the PBGC to quickly develop and implement rules and processes to review applications and authorize payments to multi-employer pension plans in critical financial condition. This work was unprecedented and complicated. The speed at which the PBGC worked was admirable, but there were lapses. The payment to multi-employer plans for dead participants was unfortunate, and the length of time it took to address the issue was troubling. The PBGC is now running a surplus, particularly with respect to the single employer plan program, and that surplus is expected to grow. It raises questions about the size of the premiums the employer plan sponsors are required to pay. I realize the PBGC does not set those premiums, and I recognize that the size of the premiums has a budgetary impact. Nonetheless, I think this is an issue worth debating, and if I am confirmed, I look forward to working and engaging with Congress on this important topic. There are also historical issues involving the PBGC that remain of concern. The treatment of the Delphi salaried workers during the General Motors bankruptcy continue to raise questions. I am ready to work with this committee and Congress to address all of these issues and more. If confirmed, I will put my experience in the private sector and that of leading a federal government agency to work to review all aspects of the PBGC's operations to ensure that the agency is operating with excellence, transparency, and is responsive to congressional oversight. Thank you for your consideration, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Morrissey.
Thank you, Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Wyden, and members of this committee. It is an honor to appear before you today as you consider my nomination to serve as General Counsel of the Department of the Treasury. I would like to thank President Trump for this opportunity to serve our country, and I would like to thank Secretary Bessent for his confidence in me. I am also grateful to the members and staff of this committee who have taken the time to meet with me. I've appreciated these opportunities to discuss your priorities, and if confirmed, I look forward to working together. I would also like to thank my family. First, my wife Tara is here today. Tara and I met as classmates at the Notre Dame Law School, and since then we've both been blessed with opportunities for public service at different points in our careers, first as law clerks at the U.S. Supreme Court, and later as lawyers at the Department of Justice. I'm deeply grateful for Tara's advice, support, and love in all of our many adventures. Next, our three sons, each of whom we are extremely proud of: Daniel, age 12, Sean, age 9, and Brendan, age 3. And finally, my parents, Brian and Catherine Morrissey, and Tara's parents, Michelle Wells and Larry and Rhonda Stuckey. There is not enough time and there are not enough words to adequately thank each of you for the countless sacrifices you made while raising us and those you continue to make for our family today as we raise our boys. I had the privilege to serve at Treasury in the President's first term, including during the pandemic, when much of our work focused on implementing the important legislation Congress enacted to see the country through that storm. If confirmed, it would be an honor to return to the department and contribute to its efforts to meet the new challenges and new opportunities we face today. It would also be a special privilege to lead Treasury's legal division, which I know from personal experience is home to some of the finest and most dedicated lawyers in the world. I would be honored to become colleagues with them once again. Treasury's responsibilities are vitally important. The liberty and prosperity of all Americans depends, in no small measure, on Treasury's ability to successfully protect the integrity of our financial system and our tax code, to advance policies that foster economic growth, and to use the United States' economic power to combat threats to our national security. The legal division does not set policy in any of these areas. Rather, our role is to ensure that the actions Treasury takes to fulfill its mission are lawful, durable, and clear. First and foremost, we are responsible for ensuring that the Treasury's actions are faithful to the laws Congress has entrusted the Department to administer, and ultimately to the Constitution we all take an oath to serve. Second, we are called upon to provide policymakers with our best judgment on how the Department's legal authorities appropriately may be used to solve the challenges of the day while minimizing litigation and other risks. And third, we have a duty to ensure that Treasury's legal actions are clear. As I have learned from both sides of the table, serving in government and representing clients in the private sector, the first step to compliance is ensuring that the rules of the road are clearly stated and adequately explained. If confirmed, my legal advice will always be rooted in these principles. If confirmed, I will also remain focused on the importance of a close working relationship with Congress. That was an enduring lesson from my time at Treasury during the pandemic, when there was no time to waste in ensuring that the Department implemented the laws Congress passed to combat that threat lawfully, swiftly, and effectively. I hope to rely on that experience in our future work together. And finally, if confirmed, I pledge to the committee that I will honor the Treasury Legal Division's proud tradition of integrity, excellence, and professionalism, and that I will work every day to serve as a faithful steward of that office who aims to build upon its strong foundations and pass it off stronger to its future leadership. Thank you again for your time today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. I'll start with you, Mr. Barloom. As USTR's former general counsel, you supervised U.S. litigation in the WTO dispute settlement system. It's not a perfect system, particularly because many disputes drag on for years, but it can be a useful tool, particularly for expanding agricultural market access. While I understand there's a need to reform WTO dispute settlement, we should not discount it as a tool altogether. If confirmed, would you support the United States pursuing offensive WTO cases where appropriate, particularly for America's agriculture industries?
Thank you for that question, Chairman Crapo. And yes, most definitely, I will do so. During my time in the first Trump administration, we did pursue disputes at the WTO. I don't believe there are disputes pursued more recently, but I certainly think that there is a role for the WTO dispute settlement system, particularly to gain access for our farmers and our businesses.
Thank you. And the prior administration abandoned key longstanding digital trade commitments in the e-commerce negotiations at the WTO. These included, 1, promoting the free flow of data, 2, combating forced data localization, 3, preventing forced technology transfer, and 4, promoting open competitive markets for digital goods and services. Can we expect to see the USTR actively promote these digital trade commitments at the WTO, particularly and especially given the policy vacuum that China and Russia will otherwise fill?
Thank you for that question, Senator. Yes, I believe that advancing digital trade should be a key component of U.S. trade policy. And I believe that there are many areas, such as the ones you mentioned, and then discriminatory policies of some of our trading partners regarding digital trade in our companies that need to be addressed at the WTO. And I very much would look forward to working with you in your office if I'm confirmed on that issue.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Dillon, the Democrats' Special Financial Assistance Program, which you referenced in your testimony, provided nearly $90 billion to pay for failing multi-employer plans without requiring any reforms to how those plans operate. As a result, the shortcomings of the multi-employer system remain. Although the PBGC does not create policy, Congress does rely on the PBGC for technical assistance, and this committee would value your insight. Can you discuss the changes Congress should consider, in your opinion, to strengthen the multi-employer pension system?
Well, thank you, Senator, for that question. And I agree with your statement that the Special Financial Assistance Program, while it certainly provided benefits to the members of those multi-employer plans that were in critical financial condition, what it didn't do was address the overall structural issues with the multi-employer pension plan system. And so while the programs that qualify for the special financial assistance have received funds, there is still an issue of the remaining program. And so if I am confirmed, I would want to work with the experts at the PBGC to provide input and technical assistance to the policymakers in Congress to address the continuing issues with the multi-employer pension plan system.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Morrissey, in your role as Deputy General Counsel during the first Trump administration, you undoubtedly became very involved in what we now fondly call the TCJA, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which is going to expire at the end of this year if we do not extend it. You advised leaders across the department on a broad range of legal issues that arise from the many important programmatic and policy responsibilities that Congress has entrusted to the department in that law as well as others. Can you please discuss how your experience in the first administration will help you as you advise Treasury personnel on regulations and guidance related to this forthcoming tax legislation?
Yes, Chairman Crapo, thank you for the question. I think it's important in any year when Congress is considering tax legislation, as you mentioned in TCJA and the potential negotiations that are going on now, that the Legal Division of Treasury is working proactively with the IRS and the Office of Tax Policy, that if there is new legislation passed, we're working with them to get rules and guidance out that are appropriate for taxpayers and their preparers, and that we're doing it swiftly so that preparers can rely on that in the next tax season.
No, thank you very much. Senator Wyden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, if you're confirmed, Mr. Morrissey, you would be one of the top lawyers in government, the top lawyer at Treasury. So I want to go through some of the priorities I have, and particularly people often say they think it's derogatory. They say, I'm a privacy hawk. I think it's an honor to be called a privacy hawk, and I want to walk you through some of the realities of privacy policy today, and in particular, DOGE stomping all over taxpayer privacy. The Center for Taxpayer Rights and others have sued the administration, arguing it broke the law by allowing DOGE and DHS to access tax return information. At risk, then, was the most private, personal, and financial data of virtually everybody in the United States. Home addresses, bank accounts, income levels, Social Security numbers, and much more. We had the acting IRS commissioner and chief privacy officer resigning, or they were pushed out over this. So my first question to you is, what would you do if on day one you walked in to a massive violation of privacy rights affecting millions of taxpayers?
Well, thank you, Senator Wyden, very much for the question and for the time you and your staff took to meet with me to discuss this and other issues. I appreciated that opportunity. Senator, I think maintaining the privacy protections for taxpayer information is one of the most important responsibilities that Treasury and the IRS have. I think Treasury has an obligation as a steward of taxpayer funds to look for ways to be more efficient, to look for ways to modernize systems, but whenever that's done, I'm committed to making sure that it's done in a way that complies with 6103 and all the other statutory protections for taxpayer information.
So you told me that you're familiar with taxpayer privacy law, and what else would you do besides what you just said? Because to tell me that you'll comply with a law isn't a whole lot for somebody who's got real expertise by their admission in privacy law. I was pleased when you said privacy law was important. I'd just like to figure out what in the heck you do.
Well, Senator, I think it would depend, of course, on whatever the particular program is that's being raised. But anytime we're discussing how the IRS or Treasury is maintaining taxpayer information, it's important that we are fulfilling statutory responsibilities for the privacy protections for that information, and also the data integrity responsibilities that go along with that.
Doesn't a lawyer have an obligation to stop representing a client who's breaking the law?
Senator, my job as general counsel, if confirmed, is to work with all policy components at Treasury to make sure they are fulfilling the statutory mission of the department in a lawful and appropriate way. And that's what I'll be confirmed, that's what I'll be committed to do if confirmed.
So are you telling me a lawyer doesn't have an obligation to stop representing a client who's breaking the law? Because that's a very real world question given what's going on with DOGE.
Senator, my obligation is to work with all of our policy components to make sure they understand the legal obligations that this Congress has put upon their components.
We've gone past that. I want to know what you would do.
I am committed to making sure that those components follow the law, and I know that's what the Secretary is expecting out of me and out of the legal division if I'm confirmed.
I'll just tell you again, for somebody who's really worked in the privacy space, I expect more. As I indicated in the office, I think you've got the expertise. I think you've got the track record. But you're walking into an awfully corrupt situation, and that's why I asked you about a very real example with respect to DOGE. Let me ask you about one other matter, and that's staffing at the IRS. 20 state attorneys general and others argued the administration illegally fired probationary employees and then lied again to cover it up by saying they were fired for poor performance. 2 district courts agreed and temporarily ordered the employees to be rehired. So what would you do, if confirmed, to deal with this kind of illegal and deceptive activity and to make sure that it doesn't continue?
Thank you, Senator. It's important for Treasury working with the IRS to make sure that the IRS is working appropriately. If there are operational or personnel changes that are designed to enhance collections or enhance customer service, that we're doing those in compliance with all laws. And that would include personnel laws. And if performance reviews are part of that, it's appropriate and important for the personnel reviews to reflect.
Are you concerned,
Mr.
Morrissey, that with all these firings, taxpayers wouldn't get refunds next year? Again, I'm looking for some of the real world consequences rather than, because you're a real lawyer, unlike me, I'd like to know what you do to deal with the refund issue, for example.
Senator, I think that it's important that the IRS be focused on modernization efforts and improving and enhancing its operational capabilities, but I'm committed, if confirmed, to making sure that in doing that, the IRS is fulfilling all of its statutory responsibilities, and that includes responsibilities related to refunds.
My time's expired.
Thank you. Senator Grassley.
Yeah, I'm going to submit to each of you questions for answer in writing. I want to spend my time talking to Mr. Barlone, not in questions, but just some frustration I have about the process of negotiations that are going on now with trade. I have no problems with the president's goal. At this point, I have no problems with maybe what's going on, but I don't know what's going on, and I don't think most of the people know what's going on. And it'd be nice if we had some positive signals coming. But because you work for Lighthizer, and at the end of his first term there as special trade representative, he was starting to negotiate with countries in Africa. Remember Kenya, who started out and was going to lead to other countries that maybe we don't even know from the name that they're in Africa, but they were seen as a wonderful opportunity for the United States. And we have 110 countries that have come to the United States after Liberation Day that they said that they want to negotiate with us. And I know we have real serious negotiations going on with maybe 15 to 20 countries right now. And I would like those to be successful. But I think we're missing a wonderful opportunity for all those countries that we don't even think about doing trade with. And this goes from experiences we've had negotiating with the lesser countries and very successful negotiations. And I'm talking about in the past, the negotiations we've had with Australia, Bahrain, CAFTA, Dominican Republic, Chile, Colombia, Panama, Peru, Morocco, Oman, and Singapore. And since these agreements with these countries were implemented, the data is pretty clear. The combined trade in goods surplus with these 15 countries has grown from about 7 billion to almost 56 billion, 689% increase. If these were a country, it would be by far the largest trade in goods surplus the United States has with any country in the world. So while we're spending our time negotiating very difficult negotiations with these big trading partners that we consider, I'm talking about Europe, United Kingdom, South Korea, Japan, India, Indonesia, China, hopefully those mature. And if these are successful, it's a big deal. But we're forgetting about all these smaller countries that it seems to me we have absolute proof that, that it delivers the goods positive for our trade balance. And it seems to me we ought to be spending some time almost parallel with these 18 countries we're negotiating and spend some time with negotiating with far easier countries that are probably very anxious to make deals with the United States. Now, I would ask you for action to it. If you don't have any, it's okay with me, but I've got a minute and 8 seconds you can use if you want to use it.
Thank you for that question, Senator Grassley, and for your comments. Let me just say first that I very much enjoyed meeting with you in your office. As we discussed, my parents are both born and raised in Iowa, and the state has a dear spot in my heart. I agree that I think that we have achieved tremendous success by having arrangements and agreements with a number of different countries, and some that you wouldn't necessarily think of, particularly for opening agricultural access. Certainly, if I'm confirmed, I will do what I can at the World Trade Organization to meet with representatives of all countries and to try to further that agenda and do what I can to try to get agreements so that we can get better trade relations with all of these countries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. Senator Whitehouse.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Mr. Morrissey, Section 7217 of the Internal Revenue Code says that it is unlawful for the President or for Cabinet Secretaries to request directly or indirectly that the Internal Revenue Service audit or investigate any particular taxpayer. Are you clear on that provision?
Senator, thanks for the question and for the time you and your staff took to meet with me on this. Yes, I'm clear and aware of that statute.
And it's a criminal act.
I think that statute includes, yes, reporting instructions and potential criminal penalties as well. Yes.
Let me turn to the Corporate Transparency Act, which we also talked about, and which also has both law enforcement and national security components to it. And since Chairman Crapo and Chairman Grassley are both here, let me take a moment to thank them for their leadership in getting that bill through. It sort of developed in the Judiciary Committee under Senator Grassley and moved to the Banking Committee under Chairman Crapo to get passed there. So I want to thank them for their good work. We did good work here too. So just a couple of observations. The Foundation for Defense of Democracies has said that the existing proposed FinCEN final rule, quote, would deliver a profound blow to U.S. law enforcement and national security interests, and noted that narco traffickers widely use U.S. anonymous shell companies to hide their identities, launder cash, and commit crimes. The Hudson Institute warned that the interim final rule, quote, undermines U.S. foreign policy and national security. The George W. Bush Institute agrees that it undermines the intended purpose to safeguard the national security of the United States. The Quincy Institute said the rule, quote, is a threat to U.S. national security. The National District Attorneys Association predicted devastating consequences for law enforcement's ability to fight criminal enterprises that exploit shell companies, to launder money, traffic drugs and weapons, and fund human trafficking and terrorism. And the National Narcotics Officers Association said that requiring businesses to disclose their true beneficial owners under the CTA is a critical tool for law enforcement. Do you understand the national security and law enforcement imperatives that caused this bipartisan law to be passed in the last Trump administration with the active support of the administration?
Senator, thank you, and thank you for our discussion of this in your office. Yes, I'm familiar with that statute and the important responsibilities that Treasury has to root out illicit finance. I think this is, the information covered by this is some of the, is very important information to those responsibilities.
Well, I would urge you to bring that awareness with you into your position at Treasury. I believe that there is an international illicit economy that is now sufficiently robust and takes on all kinds of different miscreants, whether you're a kleptocrat who has looted your country so that it doesn't have good roads or hospitals, but you have billions of dollars to stash away, or whether you're a fentanyl trafficker dealing in billions of dollars that needs to be hidden and squirreled away, or a human trafficker, or an arms trafficker, or an international criminal organization, or one of Putin's crooked oligarchs. They are all served by this illicit economy. And I think it is very much in the United States, both law enforcement domestically and national security internationally, interests to make sure that we are attacking that illicit economy. because the entities that it serves and the individuals that it serves are almost certainly our enemies. So I hope that you understand that. I'll ask you to, I've got 30 seconds left, so I'll ask you to comment on what you think is the case with respect to the danger to the United States of that international illicit economy that aids and abets or gives aid and comfort to our enemies.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, I think illicit finance can foster a range of criminal activities that undermine national securities, whether it's drug trafficking, money laundering, human trafficking. I think when the department considers regulating in this space, it's imperative that we are working to make sure law enforcement has the information it needs and that we're regulating responsibly in a way that does not impose undue burdens on law-abiding taxpayers as we try to do that.
My time has expired, and I thank the ranking member.
Senator Blackburn's next.
Thank you, and congratulations to each of you. We are pleased to have you before us today and hope that we can find bipartisan agreement in moving you swiftly so that you all can do the job that you've been nominated to do. Mr. Morrissey, let me come to you first. I want to talk about small business. In Tennessee, well over 75% of our employers are classified as small businesses, and they actually file as a pass-through entity. And we want them to stay productive and healthy and grow and continue that good employment. During the Biden administration, what we realized was that their Treasury, their IRS, their administration did not share our view of the importance of these businesses. And in order to push a lot of their agenda, they targeted for audits these small businesses. My service in the House, my service here in the Senate, we had never had so many questions and so many complaints as were coming in about the mistreatment and the targeting of these small businesses. So if you're confirmed, you would be called on to provide counsel to those at the Treasury Department on the matter. So how would you advise them? And also, does it bother you and trouble you that there is this targeting? And then how would you advise at Treasury and at the IRS in moving forward with this?
Senator Blackburn, thank you very much for the question and for the time you and your staff took to meet with me and discuss some of these issues. I think it's highly important whenever the IRS is acting or any bureau of the Treasury that has enforcement authority, whether that be through audits or other authorities, that the department is acting impartially based on the facts and the evidence and using neutral and objective criteria. So on the enforcement side, that's what I would be committed to do. And you mentioned rulemaking as well. I think it's very important when Treasury and the IRS are considering rulemakings, whether they apply to small business or others. One of the responsibilities we have under the Administrative Procedure Act is that we're responsibly assessing the costs and benefits, right, and making sure that any statutory requirement, has a cost-benefit rationale. So that's what I would be committed to advising if I were to be confirmed.
Okay, thank you for that. Also, we talked about Pillar 2. And the concerns that are there. And as I told you, I had created a chart of who paid what in Pillar 2. And it was astounding that what you have is U.S. companies responsible for nearly 40%. And it's amazing that the Biden administration ever agreed to that. And you've got China over here with 7%. That they are paying on that. So how would you advise Secretary Besant and others in the administration about the importance of protecting U.S. companies in these negotiations?
Thank you, Senator, and I appreciated our discussion of Pillar 2. I think whenever Treasury is representing the United States in international bodies like the OECD or others, there are two principles that are very important to to keep in mind. The first is that our action should always respect the sovereignty of the United States, and particularly the Congress, to establish tax policy for the United States and not the international body. And second, that when proposals are made in those types of bodies that undermine U.S. interests, that we're acting proactively to make sure that we're using our seat at those bodies to stand up for American interests.
Great. Mr. Barloon, let me come to you. We had quite a discussion on China, and I appreciated that. I did want to ask you and get on the record how we deal with the WTO. And China is in violation, in my opinion, of so many provisions, whether it is that they're making industrial subsidies or they're stealing intellectual property. They are using forced labor. So there are so many violations that are there. How can we better utilize the WTO as we look at tariffs and non-tariff barriers, trade barriers, to access different markets?
Thank you, Senator, and I very much enjoyed our discussion as well. I agree that this is a significant issue. I think that to deal with the violations that we've seen from China, that has to be action on many fronts, but certainly at the WTO, two things in particular I would focus on would be to ensure that they actually abide by their notification obligations, number one, and number two, to stop taking advantage of special and differential treatment to not play by the same rules as all the other members. And finally, I would work very closely with other members at the WTO, like-minded members, to address these issues.
Thank you. Thank you.
Time of my colleagues expired. Senator Hassan's next, but Senator Whitehouse would like to just make a procedural
Yes,
request.
I omitted to ask to put into the record the letter that Chairman Grassley and I wrote to Secretary Bessent regarding the interim final rule, and if I may have that added to the record related to my questioning of Mr. Morrissey, I would appreciate
Without
it.
objection, so ordered. Senator Hassan.
Thank you much.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member Wyden, and good morning to all three of you. Mr. Barloon, Ms. Dillon, and Mr. Morrissey, congratulations to you and your families on your nominations, and thank you for being here today to answer our questions. I'm going to start with a question to each of you, to Mr. Barloon, Ms. Dillon, and Mr. Morrissey. If you are directed by the President to take an action that would violate the law, would you follow the law or follow the President's directive? Mr. Barloon.
Thank you, Senator. I do not anticipate that there would be such a situation, and certainly I will always follow the law.
Ms. Dillon.
I also do not expect to ever be faced with that situation, but I would follow the law.
And Mr. Morrissey.
Senator, my responsibility as General Counsel is to follow the law, and that is what the President expected of the Legal Division when I served in his first administration, and that's what I'm committed to if I were confirmed this time.
Well, thank you all for that commitment to follow the law. I will say, given events of the last several months, your expectations may be too high, but we'll leave it at that. Mr. Morrissey, I want to follow up on some of the questions that Senator Whitehouse was asking. Senator Whitehouse asked you whether you were clear on what 26 U.S.C. Section 7217 says about taxpayer privacy, among other things. But I want to make it clear to the American people what that section requires. So would it be legal for the President to order IRS employees to audit a particular person or a particular small business? For example, a New Hampshire small business owner who said something that the President didn't like.
Thank you, Senator. In any enforcement context, whether it's the IRS or otherwise, and whether it's an audit or otherwise, it's imperative that the only considerations that the IRS is considering are the facts and the evidence with respect to that taxpayer, and not any political considerations or...
But I'm going to stop you right there. The federal law is clear. It's illegal for the President to order an audit, isn't it?
Senator, on all of these enforcement questions, I'm committed to following the law. Yes.
All right. If the President attempted to direct the IRS to illegally audit an individual or a small business, would you advise Secretary Bessent not to comply and advise Treasury employees to report it to the Treasury Inspector General?
Senator, if any time there's an enforcement question and any time the department is considering enforcing federal law against the taxpayer, my advice is going to be that the only considerations that matter are the
I
evidence.
understand that, but that's not my question. The law is very clear. I actually have a copy of 26 U.S.C. 7217, and I'd ask for unanimous consent that it be entered. The law is very clear. It says it's illegal for the president or cabinet members to order an audit. There are exceptions if they're just a pass-through, right? But the president can't do it. And if a Treasury employee is asked by the president or cabinet secretary to do it, they are required by the law to report it. So are you going to enforce those provisions of the law and advise the employees that that's their obligation?
Senator, yes, I'm committed to enforcing the law and complying with the law. How it applies to a particular set of facts, I would need to know those facts, but the bedrock is impartiality enforcing the law.
I understand that, but the bedrock is also keeping political elected officials, the most powerful person in the world, the president, from wreaking havoc in an individual's life by ordering an audit because they don't like that person or they don't like that person's politics. So I want to know if you are willing to hold the president accountable to the law.
Senator, I agree, and the president has spoken very forcefully about taking politics out of law enforcement, and if I'm advising anyone at the IRS or the Treasury Department, that is the principle I'm going to be focused on.
Well, I'm glad it's a principle you're focusing on. I will disagree with you that it is a principle that this president follows, because we are seeing one piece of evidence after the next that he is not following that principle and is in fact politicizing law enforcement and the rule of law in this country. Now, let me go on. I will say one other thing, which is I agree with Senator Whitehouse, too, about the importance of Treasury ramping up its sanction enforcement and working with us to make sure that as criminals and criminal entities get more and more creative, that we keep up with them in terms of our sanction tools and enforcement, because a lot of people are getting very, very wealthy from this illicit economy that Senator Whitehouse was talking about, and it is a real danger to this country. My third question I will ask for the record to Mr. Barloon. I'm sorry I didn't get to it. Thank you, Senator Wyden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, want to congratulate all the nominees. Congratulations to your family. Welcome, all of your family members. Mr. Morrissey, let me start with you. In 2013, you wrote an article about creating an effective corporate compliance and ethics program. And you stated individuals with substantial authority in the company cannot have a propensity to act criminally or unethically. Is that true?
Senator, it's been a while, but it sounds familiar, yes.
Okay. So do you think that principle should apply to government agencies and the public sector as well?
Senator, yes, I think tone from the top matters. That's often a principle in corporate compliance, which was what I was talking about there. And yes, I think commitment to the rule of law is even more important in public service.
So do you think taking money for promoting a fake tax shelter is unethical?
Chemisac Holdings.
Senator, I think it's important for anyone to comply with all applicable tax laws.
Thank you. Ms. Dillon, let me jump back to you, and I want to talk about pension risk transfers and how you plan to approach them. And as you well know, it's a process where companies offload their pension obligations to third parties, typically an insurance company, and there have been a few lawsuits filed by plan participants over this matter because of concern about more risk for retirees. In the past, it is my understanding that the PBGC has taken a hands-off approach on this issue. So if confirmed, would you change any PBGC policy related to those pension risk transfers? And do you have any views on reporting and oversight requirements of group annuity contracts?
Well, thank you, Senator, for that question. The PBGC does not have the authority to stop these transfers. They're called standard terminations. The PBGC does audit a certain number of them every year, and if there are errors in the calculations, it pursues recovery on behalf of the beneficiary of those pension plans. But I think your question raises the broader issue of why is it that sponsors of single employer plans are employing pension risk transfer techniques. And I think there's a number of reasons, but one of those reasons, I think, is the size of the premiums that employers are paying on fully funded plans and where they make an economic decision to transfer these exposures to an insurance company or something of the like. When that happens, the PBGC no longer receives that premium on behalf of those participants. It also no longer has that liability on its books. But it is a phenomenon that you've identified that we are seeing growing in the defined pension space.
And because it is growing, do you see any concerns in the future, or is it something that you would look at through auditing purposes if you address some higher risk or concern?
Well, as I indicated, the pension benefit, the PBGC cannot stop these transfers. However, part of the PBGC's purpose as defined by ERISA is to promote defined benefit pension plans. And so the fact that plans are being transferred to insurance companies and the like is of concern. And again, I think there are a lot of reasons for it, but I think one of the reasons actually that the PBGC's pension advocate identified was the size of the premiums that employers are paying.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Mr. Barloon, as you know, last week, the U.S. Court of International Trade, as well as a second federal court, ruled that President Trump's IEEPA tariffs were illegal. And the government has appealed this decision at the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. But if this decision is upheld, then President Trump would be legally obligated to remove his global blanket tariffs, including the tariffs he imposed on U.S. allies and partners with whom Trump himself signed trade agreements in his first term. If the court's decision is upheld on appeal, do you commit to follow the rule of law and support the removal of these IEEPA tariffs?
Thank you for that question, Senator. I believe that the president did have the authority to take the action that he took, but as you said, courts have ruled differently, and those decisions have been stayed, and there is an appeal. I certainly think we need to wait and see what the courts will do and follow those decisions.
But you would follow the ultimate decision of the courts?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Go.
It's your turn if you want to.
If I'm allowed.
Go.
You are allowed, Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask our ambassador to the Geneva. Thank you, Mr. Barloon. Thank you. Congratulations on your nomination. Do you believe in rules-based trade, Mr. Barloon?
Thank you for that question, Senator. Yes, I believe that it's important to have rules of the road for trading partners and to ensure that those rules are followed.
Do you think the White House has been following a rules-based trade regime?
Thank you, Senator. I believe that the White House has taken actions that are appropriate to deal with the situation that we have, and that, yes, I believe those actions have been
I don't think they've been following a rules-based system. I think they've been throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. And I think one of the reasons the Wall Street Journal has been such a Johnny One Note on this is because we're losing shelf space. And so acting imperialistic and saying, I'm going to throw a bunch of things out there just because I want to on tariffs, and then basically having the courts reverse them, and then now being challenged, is not rules-based trade. Rules-based trade would be knowing what the law actually says and using it appropriately and then actually having an effect. Now, me personally, coming from a very trade-based economy, and when I just ran out, I just came and ran into more constituents who were like, you're making the financing of everything more expensive, especially medical equipment. And I was like, well, we just had a hearing on this, and that's exactly what we heard, that we're making everything more expensive. So me personally, think we should be building alliances. But I'm trying to understand, because this is not a rules-based approach. This is not what the administration is pursuing. It's pursuing chaos. And it's pursuing almost an imperialistic, I am all powerful, I can do whatever I want, I can be unbounded. Well, 2 courts just said you cannot be unbounded and you are not following IEPA. Okay, so now the administration is saying, okay, well, I'm just going to find other things and be generally as broad too. And the problem with that is you're going to continue to hurt a lot of small businesses on this path. And so I'm just trying to understand, do you think the president and do you or the president support the WTO? Or do you think that we should get out?
Thank you for that question, Senator. I believe that there are significant problems with the WTO. I think that it has gone astray. I think that we've seen that, for example, with the large civil aircraft cases, where for years there were subsidies that harmed our companies that weren't effectively dealt with. At the same time, I do believe...
So does that mean, in that case, do you think a faster process? I don't mean to interrupt, but I want to know your thought. How would you have fixed that example you just gave?
Well, I think that's, thank you for that question. I think that's a very good question, because frankly, you had decades of litigation there. And at the end, although while I was general counsel, we received the largest award in the history of the WTO, in many ways it was too little, too late. I think that you need to look at all the tools in the toolbox. That can include dispute settlement at the WTO, but it's not necessary. There may be other options that you need to look at as well. Certainly, if I'm confirmed to be the ambassador to the World Trade Organization, I will work with all of the members there to try to ensure that they do follow the rules and to advance the interests of the United States.
So you believe in a rules-based situation, even though the president isn't really following those rules, and you think that we could promote some changes to WTO for faster results in resolving conflicts?
Thank you. I do believe that there are potential reforms at the WTO. I'd be happy to talk with you and your office about what that might look like. I believe that there have been significant weaknesses and problems with dispute settlement in the past, but that we should engage in good faith with other members to try to see if we can improve the system.
Well, what I don't like about this imperialistic approach practically is that you're not arguing about the rules. And I think in a more integrated global economy, and certainly a more connected information economy, you can argue for rules. In fact, I think right now, for example, if we and Japan and Israel and a couple of other countries, India, got together and said, we believe these are the rules of the road for buying technology from countries that are democracies and follow the rule of law, and anybody who buys from other countries that have government backdoors, well, that's a foolish thing. So you could. There are things like the Cape Town Accord that also say if you buy, airplanes from people who meet these standards, you get a discount. So we're not using our clout, is my point. I'd rather use our clout on the rules and build alliances around those rules and implement them at the WTO and get the upper hand in what we already have a natural advantage in. But right now, we are throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. The courts are turning it down. In the meantime, businesses are getting hurt, all that problematic. But the real issue is we're losing shelf space. And when you lose shelf space, then when our growers come back to try to get their product on, just as we heard from the soybean people, they can't get back on. So they never, ever recovered market share. So I just hope your advocacy, and would love to talk further with you about this. I do not think it should take 10 or 15 years to get a WTO decision on unfair Airbus subsidization and payment of that resolved. I don't really think it should take 10 or 12 or whatever, how many years it took. So I do, but I think leaning into that, which is going to be your day job, and being proud that the United States has these economic rules. I think that's a better way to go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Donald Trump ran for president on the promise to lower costs, a promise that he abandoned almost as soon as he got elected.
WTO.
He also promised his, quote, rich as hell donors that he would deliver big tax breaks. So right now, Senate Republicans are working overtime to pass billionaire tax giveaways, partly paid for by kicking 14 million people off their health care, and partly paid for by using magic math to pretend that those tax giveaways don't cost as much as they actually cost. Now, we've seen this play before. In 2017, Trump's first tax giveaway to the wealthy was supposed to cost just $1.5 trillion. And that was after there were a bunch of budget gimmicks to keep the total down. But even that wasn't a big enough giveaway. After the bill passed, the Trump Treasury Department drafted regulations to implement the new law, and corporations sent armies of lobbyists in to write even more loopholes into the tax laws. Now, Mr. Morrissey, you were Deputy General Counsel at Treasury at this time, so you may remember lobbyists from foreign banks like Credit Suisse and Barclays one big new international tax loophole for loans that they make to U.S. subsidiaries. Do you know how much those big banks pocketed from that extra giveaway engineered in the Treasury Department?
Senator, I'm familiar with many of the regulations under TCJA, but not the answer
Not
to
that
your specific,
one?
not the answer to your
Well, then I will
specific question.
tell you, it was $50 billion, according to the Joint Committee on Taxation. Now, today, President Trump and congressional Republicans are working to pass a new set of tax cuts for billionaires, millionaires, and giant corporations. This one, the price tag is around $4 trillion. And this time, they are planning to pay for it in part by slashing Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act by nearly $1 trillion and kicking 14 million Americans off their health care. It is handout time for billionaires and austerity for everyone else. Mr. Morrissey, you're nominated to be general counsel at Treasury, meaning you would help in the drafting and the implementation of this bill if it passed, maybe adding another $50 billion tax loophole here and another $50 billion tax loophole there. So, Mr. Morrissey, I just make sure you think through what this means. Do you know how many people will have to lose their Medicaid coverage just to pay for one of those $50 billion tax loopholes out of a $4 trillion Trump tax giveaway?
Senator, if I were to be confirmed, I would be committed to making sure that folks working at Treasury on tax issues are clear that the policy judgments in these space belong to the Congress.
That's not the question I'm asking here, Mr. Morrissey. I know you'd like to duck this one. My question is, when you create a $50 billion tax giveaway, do you know how many Americans lose Medicaid coverage to make up $50 billion? Do you know what those numbers are? These are just numbers.
Senator, again, the policy judgment is with the Congress, and
no,
Treasury
it's not a policy question I'm asking you. If you're going to be over at the Treasury Department and you're talking about being in a position where you can actually create a $50 billion loophole, and I know you can do that because you've done it in the past, I just want to make sure when you're doing the pluses and minuses of doing this, you have some idea how many Americans will lose their Medicaid coverage in order to make up for a $50 billion loophole. Do you have any idea how many people have to lose Medicaid coverage to create $50 billion?
Senator, whatever judgments this Congress
10,
makes in the statute
1,000,
to do
a million?
that,
Do you have any idea what that number is?
Senator, if I'm confirmed, I'm committed to making sure we are implementing.
Do you not
whatever
have any idea about what that number is, or do you just not want to say it?
Senator, my role would be on the legal side, the policy judgments, the weighing
I
of
will
these
take
important
that as you
issues.
just don't want to have to admit it. It's 700,000 people to make up for a $50 billion loophole. It's like cutting off every single Medicaid recipient in the state of Nevada just to fund another $50 billion loophole like the ones you all managed to do last time around when you gave foreign banks this special loophole. And that's what this bill is all about, taking from struggling families to give handouts to billionaires and big corporations. In fact, according to independent experts, Trump's big, beautiful bill will take money away from the bottom 40% of families and turn around and shovel nearly $400,000 to everyone who's in the top 0.1%. So let me just ask you one last question. We'll finish this up. At a time when families are struggling with higher costs under President Trump, do you really think that Trump's big, beautiful bill should take away money from working class Americans, Mr. Morrissey?
Senator, I think the tax legislation that this Congress passed in 2017 raised living standards and helps Americans across the spectrum. And if Congress decides to take new action, I'm committed to working at Treasury to make sure we implement that.
You know, I just got to say, tax cuts for the wealthiest, a $50 billion loophole here, another one there, and so what? If hundreds of thousands of people lose their Medicaid and access to health care, that's what this bill is all about, and I think it's obscene. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Senator Wyden has had to step away to vote. He should be back momentarily, and he wanted to ask another couple of questions. So until he returns, I will ask another couple of questions. And the first one, Mr. Barloon, is for you. Back to the USTR and WTO reform. The USTR's 5-year report on the WTO indicates a poor record and elusive prospects for reform. Some of this is certainly outside the control of the United States, but some of the inability is a result of the prior administration's lack of an active agenda for reform and refusals to tell partners what it wanted. The USTR also relied on outside consultants who only focused on interest-based negotiations, whatever that meant, which never yielded results. What would be your approach to encourage progress with WTO reforms?
Thank you for that question, Senator. I think that the United States in the past has been a leader at the WTO, certainly a leader in the foundation of the WTO. And if I'm confirmed, I will do my best to work with other members there and to take a leading role for the United States and to bring about much needed reform.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Dillon, in contrast to the multi-employer system, the PBGC's single employer insurance fund is healthy. According to PBGC's latest annual performance report, the single employer fund was in a positive net position of $54 billion at the end of fiscal year 2024. Given its overall positive financial position, what lessons or structural differences in the single employer pension system should Congress consider applying to the multi-employer system?
Well, thank you, Senator, for that question. I think it's an important one. And it's an interesting question from a historical perspective because when ERISA was passed, I think the expectation was that single employer plans would be more risky than multi-employer plans because multi-employer plans would have multiple employers funding them. And so they were structured very differently. You don't have the variable premiums of multi-employer plans. The premiums are lower, and there's less restrictions as opposed to the single employer plans. Now, as we look here today, to your point, the single employer plan program at the PBGC is running a significant surplus, whereas a multi-employer plan program, we have plans that are in distress. The most severely financially distressed plans have been addressed through the SFA, but we still have plans that are distressed, and I think Congress has done a lot of work here. The Senate did a lot of work here. The Joint Select Committee, I think, had some very good ideas for ways to address these structural issues. And if I'm confirmed, I would look forward to working with this committee and Congress to examine those proposed solutions to potentially apply to the multi-employer program.
Well, thank you very much. And Mr. Morrissey, I don't really have another question for you, but while we're waiting here, I thought maybe I'll just respond to some of the things that have been said and get your opinion on this. I know that you're not in the policymaking zone right now, and we are. But some of the things that were said about the tax bill probably needs to be set straight. The bill has got a score of, an alleged score of $4.3 trillion, meaning it's going to increase the deficit by $4.3 trillion. The way that happens is it's going to cause a $4.3 trillion tax increase on people if we don't extend current tax law. So we're having this big battle over current policy and so forth. But of that $4.3 trillion tax increase that is going to happen if we don't act, 2.6 trillion of it is tax increase on people making less than $400,000 a year. And actually it's less than $200,000 a year because that 400 number is a married couple. And another 1.7 trillion of it is small businesses and other pass-through organizations. And then another sizable amount of it is for tax credits to business, for research and development, for bonus depreciation. It's a increased, stepped up speed of depreciation and so forth, which generates super investment in the United States in terms of capital. So I think we ought to understand what we're talking about when we hear these kinds of allegations. With that, I see that Senator Wyden has arrived, and you are welcome to have your next couple of questions, Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your courtesy. Mr. Barloon, do you agree that trade agreements have to be approved and implemented by the Congress? That's the way we tried to proceed during the Biden administration. And I'm going to be working with all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to deal with it. What's your position on that question?
Thank you for that question, Senator. I believe that it depends on the scope and breadth of the different agreements.
So you're not taking a position, but on the basic proposition, it's a yes or no question. On the basic proposition, do you think it's important that trade agreements are approved and implemented by Congress? That's the way it was done with President Biden.
Well, thank you, Senator. First of all, I think it's very important for the USTR to consult with and work with you and members of this committee, and I certainly would pledge to do that if I'm confirmed.
Let the record note that you aren't willing, when asked, to say that as a policy proposition, you support what was done with the predecessor to Donald Trump. Let me ask you about one other matter with respect to your work. You advised last year Temasek Holdings, a foreign company owned by the government of Singapore, and when the committee staff followed up about this, you said you advised Temasek on potential trade policy agreements, but this wasn't disclosed. What's going on here?
Thank you for that question, Senator. I certainly fully and accurately responded to all questions. I believe that the language there was potential developments. I have never directly represented, aided, or advised any foreign entity in any trade agreement or trade dispute with the United States.
So just last year, a company fully owned by a foreign government paid you to advise them on international trade, and you didn't think this was something that the committee ought to know about. That, in my view, is very troubling. One last point. Mr. Morrissey, as someone who is a lawyer in name only, my wife agreed to marry me. She said, oh, you handled the Gray Panther legal aid folks. You're not a real lawyer. You are a very good lawyer. But I'm concerned that the responses you gave to my questions and some of my colleagues don't indicate that you're walking into a 5-alarm fire at the Treasury building, and we're going to have to find a way to make sure, yes, that we follow the law, but also we adhere to basic approaches that are going to protect public safety. And with respect to privacy and this question of following laws that could have implications for terrorism, I felt that those weren't adequately addressed today, and you can count on the fact, if you're confirmed, you and I are going to have more conversations about this, and I'm going to be watchdogging this every step of the way, because these issues with respect to privacy and the other matters that we talked about here go right to the heart of what the rule of law is all about, and if confirmed, you're going to be in a very important position to ensure that that's adhered to. Senator Crapo, thank you again for the courtesy that I could go vote and get back. I yield back.
You're welcome. I did want to clear up one of the points that you just made, Senator Wyden, and Mr. Barloon, with regard to what you disclosed about your representations. Did you ever advise or even discuss with Temasek or any other foreign entity an ongoing trade negotiation or dispute with the United States?
No, I did not, Senator.
Thank you. I believe that is the, we don't have any others coming, right?
I believe that's the case.
We got another vote going, so I doubt that another senator will show up. And Senator Wyden and I are done with our questions, so I want to thank you, our nominees, for appearing before us today. I believe you are each clearly qualified to serve in the respective positions to which you've been nominated, and I look forward to voting for each of your nominations. And I urge all of my colleagues to do the same. With that, I remind my colleagues that the deadline for submitting any questions for the record is 5 p.m. on Friday, June 6. And with that, the hearing is concluded and we stand adjourned.